So my focus for today is going to be the bowl. I want to try and get all of the reflections painted in. I've started on the base there. I'm not particularly happy with it. I don't know why yet. I can't identify the reason why. I don't think I've spent enough time focusing on it. I've got the main areas of colour in, but it's quite crude at the moment the way it's painted in. I'm going to finish this scroll work off, add the highlights, and hopefully if I'm lucky I'll get on to painting the stalks onto the cherries. The painting will then have to dry for a day or so before I can start to glaze areas. So I'm going to get on with some of those details. I'm going to move onto this area here and add some of the reflections in. So the temptation when you're doing this sort of work is to get a small brush and start to get fussy. As it was always, try and get the main areas in first and keep it fairly subtle. So I'm using there's some of the highlights. I don't want the highlights, I should say, some of the areas that are light. I don't want too light. Because remember, most of the bowl is very, very dark, and we want them highlights to really stand out. So I've got a Naples yellow, yellow ochre and raw umber for this, and this is just a reflection of some of the surface that the bowl has sat on. We've got the black card there, and then there's this, which is a piece of card that it's sat on. Due to the curve of the bowl, the reflections are all sort of distorted. To get a nice smooth line, you notice I'll hold the brush really close to the end and allow you've got a greater arc that you can turn through. If I'm holding the brush here, I've only got that much movement that I can create a line with. So holding it further back and resting my hand on the stick, I can create a much bigger arc. I'm using a little bit of linseed oil to make sure that the paint goes on smoothly. Allows the paint to flow off the end of the brush, I should say. Now this comes up here, there's a sort of a corner there. Again, when I want a really sharp corner, I shape the brush, so I'll rub it on and then flip it over, and I shape the brush so it's sort of a chisel shape. Allows me to get much sharper lines. When it gets to this stage in the painting, the way you hold the brush can really affect the marks that you make. So I'm trying to keep the brush perpendicular to the canvas, so it's not like this when I'm making a mark, because that will drag into the areas I don't want it to go. So the brush is perfectly aligned with the direction of the stroke that I'm making. And of course you've got to try and keep your hand steady. Holding my breath usually works with that. I want this line to be quite sharp here because, well, that's exactly how it is sharp. It gets a bit ambiguous at this end. There are reflections. There are reflections of other objects which are quite vague. When you're doing a curve like this, You don't want sort of little irregularities in it, it's got to be perfectly flowing. So sometimes stand back and take a look at it and see, make sure you've not got any bumps or lumps in it. Now I'm painting on a fine grain linen here, and even with the fine grain linen there's the grain of the canvas. I can't get an absolutely 100% sharp line because obviously there's the bumps in the canvas. Can get, actually I have used even smoother grade canvas than this. It's portrait grade, it's one of the finest you can get, and that does help. Or you could paint on prepared surfaces such as sort of MDF that's been sanded back really smooth. I do prefer a little bit of grain in the canvas. Okay. Now there are other reflections. There's reflections from the back of the easel, which is a pinky yellow. So I'm using this warm white here. I'm not using titanium white. The titanium white's going to be saved for the real bright highlights. I've got this warm white at the moment. So that's transparent oxide red and some Naples yellow mixed together to create this colour, and it curves around here. A little bit of oil in it, just tiny drop, just to allow it to flow. And this comes to a really sharp point here. Because it's very polished silver, these reflections have to be quite sharp, otherwise you won't get that polished effect. If you have metal that's tarnished, then the reflections tend to be a bit more blurred. Top corner. With detail work like this, as I said before, it's about getting it sort of blocked in, and then you can just continue. Once you've got the general shapes, you can just refine and refine and refine. Now that's a bluey purpley colour, so I'm using a tiny touch of black and some transparent, some crimson alizarin, and a tiny bit of, there's a bit of the grey already mixed up that's going to go into that. So this butts up against the edge of the colour that I just put on. I'm trying to paint it in without actually getting the two colours to touch, and maybe even better painting the dark colour on first. Okay. Now we've got reflection of the back of the easel. All of these patches of colour are all the same shape. The paint's going on relatively thickly here. You want it to be opaque and quite strong in chroma. I don't want. I want these reflections to be quite strong. And there's a grey on this side. So I'll carry on the way I'm going and then work on the other side afterwards. It's like a helicopter. Now there's another patch of this colour and there's a band in between the two patches, so I'm going to paint the other patch first. That's the back of the easel reflected into the bowl. Now I'm just greying that colour down a little bit because there's a similar colour over here. And it goes, and that's the shelf that all of this is sat on. There's a bit of blending needed on this. What happens when you're painting is, you've seen the whole process. You start out squinting, painting really broad areas, and don't worry about the subtleties inside those areas. And then gradually, over the period of the painting, you begin to home in on subtleties, and that's where we are now. So I've got the general darks and lights in place, and now I can afford to spend some time just adjusting things, adding further details. So that's the shelf that fades away, and that goes to approximately up here somewhere. and then there's some darks around that I'm going to paint in now. It was almost pure black at one point. And that's here underneath it. This is just, you could take these fussy or as free as you want with this, depending on what your finished result is that you're after. I do go paint a lot of detail, but then you could go even further. There are people that get magnifying glasses out and are incredibly detailed. I want to get the effect of the object so that it's convincing, but obviously I don't want to spend that much time on details that you're just not even going to notice. You can get the effect without expending that amount of effort. Some people see it as a challenge though, I guess. I've just gone over that edge a little tiny bit. Again, we're in this sort of area of ambiguity. I'm not quite sure what's what, which bit's a reflection of what. So I'm going to the bolder shapes. There is a little line that comes. There's a grey area actually. Let me get that in first. There's a grey area that comes down here, and that's. I think there's a shadow on the floor. This grey area comes down here, and then it's surrounded by a lighter grey. So I'll get that lighter grey in. And I think you.